Welcome, Facebook Live viewers. My name is Brad Bodis, and I'm an attorney with the Bond and Bodis Law Offices, and we thank you for joining us again this week. We're here to discuss a very important topic today, and that's how people can keep their homes. A lot of people that have gotten behind on their rent and on their mortgage payments over the last year, and we want to talk about options that are available. But just to get started, the Bond and Bodis Law Offices are located throughout Alabama, we're throughout Mississippi, and we're in the Knoxville area in Tennessee. And we help people with money problems. And we know a lot of folks have, what we've been through this last year, are having financial problems. So please, during this time, we're offering absolutely free initial consultations with a practicing, experienced attorney. If you think you're going to be having some money issues going forward, please reach out to us. Be proactive. Don't wait till the last minute. We'll just talk through your options with you and see what we can do to help you. I'm really excited today. We have the managing attorney with the Legal Services Alabama office in Huntsville, Alabama, Holly Ray, joining us. And Holly is well respected by the consumer bar in the state of Alabama, and she has particular expertise in working with people that are facing evictions and or foreclosures. In fact, I had the idea to do this show with Holly because she's scheduled to teach a lot of attorneys about these important issues at a seminar that's coming up. So Holly, thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We are really excited to talk to you today. I learned in preparing for today's episode that you went to law school with one of my partners, Mary Poole. You both attended the Jones School of Law at Faulkner University.
We did. Approximately a million years ago.
Well, she said that you were going to be good because you're smart. So I like smart people. But why don't you tell our viewers a little bit more about your background? Where are you from originally, and where did you do your undergraduate work? Let us know a little bit about you, Holly.
Sure. I'll out myself with my smart kid credential. I'm a Huntsville native. I grew up in the kind of Ryland Gurley area of Huntsville. I went to public school through 8th grade, and then I skipped high school in its entirety. I went to college when I was 14 years old at Mary Baldwin College in Stanton, Virginia. At 16, I transferred home to Auburn University, graduated from Auburn at 18 years old with a bachelor's degree in health services administration, took a year off, went to law school at Jones. So I passed the Alabama State Bar. I started law school before I was legally old enough to have a drink. That was a really bad move on my part. It was stressful.
Wow.
But I have been at Legal Services since that time. I actually started working here as a volunteer my first year of law school. So we're going on 17 years at Legal Services.
Now, Holly, that is just so impressive. You actually skipped high school and went straight to college at age 14?
14.
That's impressive, but what's more impressive to me, and I'll tell our listeners out there, for you to have worked with Legal Services all of those years, you're not practicing law to make $1 million. You're practicing law to help people. That's clear, and I admire you for what you do and for what all of the attorneys with Legal Services do. There's definitely a big need out there, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. I do this because I grew up in a blue-collar family. My parents ran a restaurant for years. I know what it's like to get calls from debt collectors at home when you're a latchkey kid at 12 years old. That's why I do what I do, is everything starts at home, and that's why my job is protecting homes.
Well, it's until somebody actually has financial problems, it's just hard for them really to fathom what it's like and what the stress of not being able to pay your bills or know that you're going to have a home for your family is like. I'm sure you've been through this, but I counsel folks all the time, well, up until the last year, they would sit across my desk. Now they're usually, I'm meeting with them like this these days. But so many of them say, I never thought I'd be talking to a bankruptcy attorney or to an attorney about an eviction or a foreclosure, because people don't expect to have money problems. But when they happen, the burden, the stress is just really tough. And we want to talk through some of these important issues with you today, Holly, and let people know what options are available. So today's episode is going to focus on the eviction and foreclosure protections that are available in the state of Alabama, and really not just Alabama, in most states, because a lot of protections that exist are federal protections as opposed to simply protections provided by the state of Alabama. So we want to talk to people about these protections and more importantly, how they can utilize them, because they don't just happen on their own necessarily. Holly, tell us, let's start with the eviction moratoriums in the state of Alabama and elsewhere. Tell us what the current laws provide and what people need to do to take advantage of the eviction prohibitions in the state of Alabama right now.
Sure. So there's a lot of misinformation going around about eviction moratoriums, eviction bans, what the law is, what it isn't. And certainly COVID has made that 10 times more difficult, because at various points over the past year, we've had 3 different eviction bans in place. You may have heard of the CARES Act. That was the first eviction ban that has expired. At one point, Governor Ivey had an Alabama-specific eviction ban that expired last summer. So right now we operate under the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC's, eviction moratorium. That relief has been extended several times. It currently will expire at the end of June. There are certain things that you have to do to qualify for that relief. You need to make below $98,000 a year for a household of 1, or double that for a household with 2 earners in it. Most people who come to us and most residents of Alabama are going to fall well below that. So that's not the one we really worry about. You will need to be making good faith efforts to pay your landlord as close to market rent as you can. And that has become a big pitfall in the court systems, because the CDC doesn't stop your landlord from filing an eviction. The CDC acts as an affirmative defense to eviction if one is filed. And so judges have the opportunity to question you on that, as to how much you've made in partial payments, what your income is, what your expenses are, and why you've paid what you paid or haven't paid what you haven't paid. And that gets really invasive. I tell clients that it often feels like what people expect bankruptcy court to be like. You kind of expect that you're going to have to get financially naked filing bankruptcy. It is actually worse right now in eviction court than I've ever seen it be in a meeting of creditors in a bankruptcy. I've never seen this level of invasive questioning of, well, how did you spend your stimulus? Why did you spend $600 on tires? Those kinds of questions. So that's a qualifying factor. You'll also have to show some kind of income loss related to COVID. That's a pretty broad umbrella to fall under. For some people, it's obvious they lost their job due to COVID, or their hours were cut due to COVID. For some people, that gets a little bit more questionable. Maybe you're on Social Security, so your income didn't change, but your expenses dramatically changed due to COVID. That might be having your pharmacy deliver to you and paying that fee, or having your groceries delivered so you didn't have to leave home. That might be, hey, grandma's house became where 13 kids were homeschooling with virtual school, and I had to feed them all. So my income didn't change, but man, did my expenses. All of those things can also play into the factors. Important things to know about the CDC moratorium are 2 big pitfalls. One, it does not cover the balance that you owe. It can stop you from being put out on the street for owing it, but when this thing expires, currently set at the end of June, you still owe your landlord that balance. The other pitfall that we've run into a lot, because we're now in the 2nd year of the pandemic, is that if your lease has expired, the CDC moratorium doesn't stop your landlord from non-renewing your lease. If you're being evicted because you're under an expired lease, the CDC doesn't contemplate that. And so if your eviction is for non-payment of rent, it can protect you. But if you know that your lease came up for renewal in April or is coming up in May or June, anticipate that you may get a non-renewal notice. And unfortunately, as it currently stands, the CDC is not a defense to that.
So let me make sure I understand there. So if the lease is expired, and for non-attorneys out there, there's really two important things here. There's the legal agreement, the lease you have with your landlord, and then there's the court proceeding, which is the eviction proceeding. And you're telling me something I didn't know, Holly. So if the lease is expired, there is no restriction on the landlord's ability to go forward with the eviction?
That is correct. If your lease has expired, if your contract with your landlord has expired and they gave you proper non-renewal notice, which under most leases is a 30-day notice. If your lease was due to expire on June the 1st and they've given you notice on April the 30th, that is sufficient notice under most leases. It's dependent upon the terms of the contract. And so if you weren't out by June 1st, they could sue for eviction in early June, even though the CDC hadn't expired, because they're not evicting based off non-payment of rent. They're evicting based off the expired lease.
So what I want our viewers to understand, and this is very important, got to stand up and take action if you're facing an eviction proceeding. Far too many people, they receive court papers, or they receive some sort of notification, and they just ignore it and don't realize they have any rights. But if you file a response and show up in court, there are options, as Holly's described here. And Holly, you're the expert on this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but there's got to be some affirmative step taken by the individual facing eviction. They can't just ignore the eviction papers. Then you said they have to be able to show that they've made some sort of good faith effort to pay. And the question is certainly invasive, but what I encourage viewers is if you have some stimulus money, if you have some tax refund money right now, this may be one of the important areas that you need to use some of that money. Not all of it, but use some of it to show that you've made a good faith attempt to pay what you can towards your rent. But as with the mortgages where people haven't been able to make their payments, the other important issue Holly has mentioned here is the rent's not just going away. It's still owed. So at some point, whether it be at the end of June when the existing moratorium expires or at some future date, if you want to stay in your apartment, you're going to have to figure out a way to deal with that rent payment. Holly, do you have any idea how many of these evictions are just going forward on a default type basis right now, where people aren't asserting their defenses?
Based off my experience appearing in court in Madison County, and we cover 13 counties out of our office, so basically most of North Alabama, it seems to be about half. Part of that is that evictions carry one of the shortest deadlines to answer to respond to court in any area of civil law. It's a 7 calendar day deadline. So if you're served with eviction papers, and eviction papers are also unique in that they don't have to be served by a processor or a sheriff. They can do what's called mail and mail. They can stick it on your front door, put a copy in the regular U.S. mail, and that's sufficient. From the day you see it, from the day they stick it on your front door, you've got 7 days to answer. And that's a really short deadline compared to, you have 14 days in small claims court. That's a really short deadline to answer. And a lot of people just plain miss that deadline because they don't notice it or don't know where to go. And the fact of the matter is the clerk has a checkbox form in every county of Alabama to fill out an eviction defense. It takes 30 seconds to go click the box. But a lot of people get those and I call it ostrich syndrome. They put their head in the sand. It's a terrifying thing to receive and they feel like they've run out their options when they really haven't. There's a cornucopia of defenses to eviction.
Yeah, so again, people, if you're listening to this or you know somebody that might be facing eviction, these protections don't just go into effect on their own. You've got to stand up for yourself or hire an attorney, whether it be somebody with the bond and notice law offices, we can help, or if you can't afford a private attorney, certainly Legal Services does tremendous work on behalf of consumers in Alabama. And you'll see on your screen here that we have contact information for Legal Services and for our law firm. If you need help, again, be proactive. Reach out for help. Holly, I saw something interesting this past week, and I haven't looked into it in depth, but I understand that is it the CDC that came out with some guidelines that suggested that if the information isn't provided about these protections, it could be a violation of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Are you familiar with these? Probably within just the last week.
Yeah, that's been in the past couple days. It was the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau came out and said court attorneys needed to provide this information to tenants that they might be eligible for this assistance and how to get more help to comply with regulations from the CFPB. Some of our landlord attorneys here in North Alabama literally send a letter to tenants before they evict them, and it will have legal services phone number on it. Some of them don't, but many of them do. Others have landlords sign in Madison County. Our judges make landlords sign an affidavit that the tenant has not provided them with a CDC declaration, trying to assert their rights under the eviction moratorium before the landlord files for eviction. So some counties are taking affirmative steps to make sure that that's met that requirement. Others haven't, but I find it very interesting that they are finding a way to tie it in under Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. Especially, we sit in a federal circuit that has some interesting wiggle room on how landlord attorneys apply under that. I think this is going to blow that wide open for tenants who might be taken advantage of.
So I want to get this message out since it's relatively new, and thanks for clarifying the federal agency that issued the guidelines, Holly. But this is important for both attorneys that may be watching and for individuals, consumers. So the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act is a law that essentially says that a collector cannot be unfair with collection activities. They can't make misrepresentations. They can't use deceptive type communications. And what this holding, or what this guidance, I guess, has provided is that if advice isn't given to the consumer before and process of the eviction that they have these rights, that it could be a violation of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and there may actually be grounds to sue the collector that is pursuing the eviction proceeding. So I encourage both consumers and other attorneys that are watching this to be aware of that. Amy, I want to move on from evictions to foreclosures. What we've just to kind of bring into an outline here is what we discussed. That the important thing is, if you're behind on your rent, don't just ignore eviction type papers. You have rights, assert them. If you can pay part of your rent, pay part of your rent, and show up in court and be prepared to explain to the court why you suffered a reduction in income and why it's important that you keep your home. Is there anything important that I've missed concerning evictions, Allie?
Sure. One thing I want people to know, again, people tend to get ostrich syndrome. It's scary to get an eviction notice. I mean, I can't think of much scarier in terms of a legal notice that you would receive. Just the mere act of filing an answer keeps you in your home for about a month. Because once you file your answer, that court case is going to get set for trial somewhere 2 to 3 weeks after you file your answer. Even if you lose in court, you've still got 7 days to move. You can be defaulted by not filing. You can lose by default. You won't have your day in court, and the sheriff can come out quickly if you don't answer in time. That can happen in as little as 10 days after you're served in some cases. But if you file your answer, you've bought yourself a month in your property. There is no way to screw it up. There's a check the box form, and I literally tell people, check the box that says other right. I want my day in court. That's enough. You don't have to have a law degree to fill it out. Check the box. Fill the form out. It's free. Just doing that gets you a month in your property and buys you the chance to talk to a lawyer and see what your rights are. And there are an army of free eviction defense lawyers at Legal Services. That is one of the services we offer around the state. We helped thousands of people last year keep their homes or get the time that they needed to move with dignity and without the involvement of the sheriff when that was the last ditch option. But make sure you file your answer.
Holly, that's such great advice. And to our viewers, this filing an answer doesn't just pertain to eviction proceedings. Certainly, it's very important because the eviction process moves so quickly. 7 days in Alabama, you have to respond. But If you're served with any kind of lawsuit, if it's on a credit card you weren't able to pay, if it's on a loan you weren't able to pay, if you don't do anything, the court will allow the creditor or your landlord to take a judgment by default against you. All you have to do is file a response, just saying you want your day in court, and you're going to gain at least another month and perhaps a good bit longer, Holly, to stop an eviction or stop a garnishment that may result from a lawsuit. Stand up for yourself, and there are attorneys out there that will help you with this. Holly, I need to add this. You were kind when you said maybe the service may be insufficient or not really the best notice that they can tack the notice on your door.
Yeah.
None of the attorneys that you or I know would do this, but there's also such a thing that we refer to as service, where somebody is supposed to serve you with a summons, and it may never get served, but as long as it's reported as served to the court's going to treat it as if you were served. So if you're behind in your rent, be aware that your landlord may be taking some sort of action against you, and pay close attention, and even check court records if you need to see if some sort of eviction or other lawsuit has been filed against you. Let's move on from evictions to foreclosures, Holly. And for our viewers, an eviction is the process of moving you out of a piece of property. It's usually going to be where you're renting property, an apartment, a home you're renting. Foreclosure is a process that's utilized by a mortgage company, mortgage servicer to take your home from you, to terminate the mortgage, and to take your home from you. Can you give us just a general outline, Holly, of the foreclosure moratorium provisions that exist in Alabama and elsewhere right now?
Sure. So the way that the current regulation gets covered on foreclosure moratoriums is a little bit different. The CDC only applies to rental property, but we also have federal guidance still hanging around that stops foreclosures for people that we call them the alphabet companies. And I hesitate to go throw a bunch of acronyms at people, but if you have any kind of loan that touches the federal government, so that's an FHA loan, Federal Housing Administration. That's a VA loan, Veterans Administration, USDA loan, the United States Department of Agriculture mortgages, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, any of those federally backed mortgages. I think you can tell why I just call them the alphabet companies now. Any of those federally backed mortgages are also subject to a moratorium that I believe has now been set through the end of September. And that applies to both foreclosures on primary mortgages on your home. So they can't foreclose on your loan. They have to affirmatively offer you, in many cases, some kind of forbearance or loan modification option if you've suffered a loss of income due to COVID. It also stops ejectments. So ejectments would be maybe your house was foreclosed prior to COVID and they were moving into the eviction piece of the foreclosure process. In Alabama, we are what we call a non-judicial foreclosure state. You don't have to sue someone under normal circumstances to take their home, but you do have to sue them to kick them out of it. And that process is called an ejectment. It acts like an eviction, but it's a circuit court case. So it's a different deadline to answer than a regular eviction, 30 days. And long story short, it stopped all of those in the middle. I have about 40 of them that just took a dead stop when this rule started last year. And the courts won't proceed with them until they get federal guidance that allows it. So that's kind of what's going on with moratoriums right now in terms of foreclosures. What's important to know there is that if you have a mortgage that is not federally backed in any way, which in varying parts of Alabama is somewhere between 20 and 40% of the market, those are not subject to any moratoriums right now. And ejectments, post-foreclosure evictions in those cases aren't subject to a moratorium either. If, for example, the most common ones we're getting right now are people who have mobile home mortgages. most mobile homes are not a federally backed mortgage. If you have a mobile home mortgage that you've fallen behind in and your contract says that you're in default, they might be entitled to repossess or to foreclose, depending on how the loan is structured. Those don't fall under either moratorium for evictions or foreclosures right now.
So, Holly, you made an important point, and for our viewers, Alabama is a non-judicial foreclosure state. For our viewers in Mississippi or Tennessee, Mississippi and Tennessee are the same. There are some states for our viewers where if somebody wants to foreclose on your home, for instance, in Florida, they actually have to file a lawsuit, and there can be a court hearing, and it can be a long, drawn-out process. But in the state of Alabama, and Mississippi and Tennessee, the foreclosure process is very quick. All that the mortgage company and mortgage servicer needs to do is publish a notice of the foreclosure sale in a newspaper of common circulation, which is usually a section or a newspaper that nobody reads. And then after that, they go to the courthouse, they hold a sale, and your ownership interest in your home is gone. So, like with the eviction proceeding, take action. Get out in front of these type proceedings and assert your rights. I will say this. I have seen foreclosures almost grind to a halt over the last year in Alabama and in Mississippi and Tennessee, Holly, even if they are not one of the, you said the alphabet type mortgages. Most have stopped, but there's a big difference between a moratorium and an actual modification of a mortgage, or the forbearance of your payments in a modification. I want to back up here and remind our viewers where we are, and then we're going to get into that in just a second. But for anyone that may have tuned in a little bit late, this is the Bond & Botus Facebook Live, and my name's Brad Botus. I'm an attorney with Bond & Botus. I've been helping people with money issues in Alabama, and our offices in Mississippi and Tennessee for over 30 years. We take a lot of pride in helping people with financial problems. Good people have money problems, and we encourage you, if you're having financial problems right now, and so many people are, reach out for help. Our offices are offering absolutely free initial consultations. We'll do them over the phone or by video like we are today, so that you feel safe. And we'll just give you some advice so that you know what the future holds. Our Facebook Live episodes live on our Facebook page, and they also are available on our website. So if you know somebody that may not be watching this live broadcast, but you think could benefit from the excellent information and advice that Holly shared today, please refer them back to this recording. It'll be available. And of course, contact information for both Holly and Legal Services Alabama and our firm have scrolled across the bottom of your screen. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need help. Our last Facebook Live was an interesting episode. We talked about some unique and new therapies for veterans that are dealing with PTSD issues, and how these therapies can not only help people overcome those issues, but avoid suicide. Suicide numbers are up, unfortunately, very significantly over the last year. They're always sad, but amongst veterans, particularly sad. And I refer you back to that episode. Today, we have Holly Ray, who is with Legal Services Alabama. She is the managing attorney for the Huntsville location of Legal Services Alabama. She teaches attorneys all over the state of Alabama about the issues we're discussing today, and that's how to protect yourself if you're facing an eviction or a foreclosure. During the first half of this live episode, we talked about how to, what rights do you have in holding off an eviction, holding off a foreclosure right now, specific laws, provisions that have been put into place as a result of the COVID pandemic. Holly, we, I think, determined that the existing deadline or expiration date for the eviction moratorium is June 30th, and then at the end of September for the protections with respect to foreclosure. People need to be affirmative. They need to step up and act.
Yes.
What I want to talk about next, it goes really into the second issue here. Yes, your rent payments are being put off right now in many instances. And yes, your mortgage payments are being put off right now. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be making these payments if you can, and it doesn't mean they're not going to become due at some point. When these deadlines expire, you're either going to have to catch up on your rent, catch up on your mortgage, or enter into some sort of modification with your mortgage servicer. What type of assistance can Legal Services Alabama offer in these regards right now, Holly? I know you all do some bankruptcy work. Would you like to talk about the options people have when it comes to dealing with these balances that are accruing?
Sure. So there are a couple of different options with past due rent and past due mortgage specifically right now. Out of the 3 rounds of stimulus that have come out, the second round pushed millions of dollars of emergency rental assistance out into the states. That further broke down certain cities and counties that had a larger population could apply for their own money. And so there are millions of dollars up for grabs around the state for tenants who are experiencing trouble with their rent due to COVID, due to no fault of their own in most cases. This is a unique situation where we've all been subject to a pandemic. I like to say we've all been in the same storm. Some of us were given different boats than others. This is a way to shore up the boats that are having some problems. For most of the state, the website that you're going to visit for this is eraalabama.com. That website is the state's program. It's administered by the Alabama Housing Finance Authority. Through the Alabama Housing Finance Authority, you can get up to a year of past due rent paid. It can go back as far as last March. It can also pay up to 3 months of forward rent at a time if you're still experiencing COVID-related hardships. We know that that's going to hit a lot of people coming forward this summer. Some employers still aren't back at full capacity. We also know that some of the summer camps and some of summer daycare is coming up. These kids are about to get out of school, and there's only so many slots to put them in with things like Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCAs and summer camp. That's going to knock some parents back out of the workforce. That counts too. So ERA Alabama is the site to apply through the state for assistance. And again, it is a large amount of assistance. You are seeing people receiving $15,000 and $16,000 in assistance through this program, and it has literally millions of dollars. To give you a rough idea, I think the number is 600 and something million for the state of Alabama as a whole.
Let me clarify. I want to make sure, because this is so important. Is it eraalabama.com or is it a .org or a .gov?
It is a .com.
Okay, good.
For Emergency Rental Assistance, Alabama.com. It uses a software platform called Neighborly, and I share that only because most of the local grants are using the same software, so they look exactly alike. But what this software is meant to do is for the tenant to go in and apply for their piece, for the landlord to go in to apply for their piece. Both parties have to apply. The landlord has to agree in most cases to accept the rental assistance and stop any pending eviction, bring the client current, and that process will proceed through. It can, in some cases, also pay past due utilities that you haven't been able to pay due to COVID, because otherwise, if you have no power in your home, you really can't live in it for very long, running water too. So that is a statewide program. As I mentioned, some of the larger municipalities were also able to apply for these funds, and 3 of those programs are up and running. Here in Huntsville, our program is up. I think they're going to scroll it across the bottom of the screen, but it's on the city's website, huntsvilleal.gov.
There it is.
You can apply for emergency rental assistance through the city of Huntsville at that link. You need to live within the city limits of Huntsville to qualify for this. Madison County was also, and to give you a rough idea, the city of Huntsville has over $6 million to distribute. through that link. So, I mean, when we start talking about the average amount of past due rent due, that is a lot of people that are going to get help for a while. Madison County has assistance pending. They have not opened their portal yet. So if you live in Madison County, but not the city of Huntsville, you still need to go through the state program, the eraalabama.com. They'll also scroll 2 links on the bottom. Mobile County has opened its funds up, as has Baldwin County. So if you live in either of those counties, you can apply through their local link for assistance. Because that's a smaller pool of applicants, it does tend to run faster than the state program. That's just because the state has millions of available people and the local municipalities do not. But in either case, in most cases, they're telling us that applications take 4 to 6 weeks to process. It's important for tenants to know that, A, they need to keep making partial payments to the best of their ability. Don't assume that you don't need to make a partial payment because you've applied for this if you have the ability to. And I'm sure Brad counsels clients in probably a very similar way than I do. I tell people to pay their bills in a certain order if they are in crisis. If you are in crisis, if you do not have enough money to pay everything that you need, medicine that keeps you alive comes first. You are no good to any creditor, your family, or anyone if you are dead. Please take the medicine that keeps you alive. Basic food, that's your, what they proverbially call the beans and rice budget. You're no good to anyone if you're starving and you will soon be dead. Don't. Meds, food, rent comes third. That's how I've counseled clients my whole career. And again, it may be a partial payment at this time, but pay what you are able to keep the roof over your head. That's what keeps you protected, both in terms of the federal eviction moratorium and just common sense. We will see other counties come online with this assistance. There are literally millions of dollars up for grabs. There is more coming out of the third round of the stimulus, and we don't know yet how that gets distributed. But if you are falling in these categories where you're getting, eviction papers, apply for assistance in the area that you're eligible for. Most of our judges have seen me now in North Alabama. I take my laptop to court, turn the screen around, and show them the application status to show that this person has done what they can. And if you don't, the websites require you to upload some documents. They are cell phone. They have a web interface, so you can take pictures with your cell phone, and as long as they're clear, you can upload that way. But if you need some help applying in terms of scanning documents or getting paperwork, you are more than welcome to come to Legal Services. We are happy to help people apply for this. We want you to stay in your home. That's the most important thing for your stability, is to stay in your home, and that's why we care and why we do this. There is assistance coming online for homeowners. That came out of the third stimulus, I believe. The federal application for that literally opened up this week. We know that the governor's office is applying with the Alabama Housing Finance Authority for that assistance. We believe that it will run very much, if people are familiar or remember the hardest hit Alabama program from back in the foreclosure crisis, we believe that it's going to follow the same general application process as that did. But that is not online yet for people facing foreclosure. And the reason it's not online yet is that their deadline is longer than the rental deadline is.
Wow, Holly. Such great
info.
And again, for our viewers that have been trying to write down these websites real quickly, this recording will live on our Facebook page, so you can go back and pause, and we'll also try to post the links individually for you so you can go and get this help that's available right now. And I love the description you gave. We've all been through a storm, and in fact, we're still dealing with the storm, but different boats. Some of us have been fortunate, and some are really struggling right now. So we need to help one another. And I'd be remiss since my firm does primarily consumer bankruptcy work if I didn't also discuss the bankruptcy options that are available. So to our viewers, there are essentially 2 different types of bankruptcy. There are types of bankruptcy where you can reorganize or restructure your debt. Almost always for an individual, that's going to be a Chapter 13 type bankruptcy. And then a straight bankruptcy, what most people think of when they hear bankruptcy. Chapter 7 is a liquidation type bankruptcy. So when these moratoriums expire, you have a large amount of rent that you can't pay, and you haven't been able to take make use of any of the programs that Holly's described, a Chapter 13 bankruptcy may be a way, if your lease hasn't been terminated, to catch up on what you're behind and stay within the property that you're leasing, the apartment or the home. And if you're behind on your mortgage payments, your first option needs to be to try to do a modification with your mortgage company. Most of them are offering some sort of modification right now, where you can either put your payments at the end of the mortgage, or you can work out some other type of repayment plan. But if these payments become due and you haven't been able to put that money away to catch up on what's behind, reach out and talk to one of our offices about restructuring your debt through a Chapter 13 reorganization. Stay in your home, stop the foreclosure. Just like the example you gave of people ignoring the summons, I'm sure you find, as I do, people put off dealing with foreclosure to the last minute.
Absolutely.
You don't want to, you want to hope that you're going to be able to solve the problem. And what we find is when you call your mortgage company, a lot of times you'll talk to one department that say, well, yeah, we'll work with you on the modification, we'll work with you, but the other department's moving forward with the foreclosure. And in Alabama, once that foreclosure sale takes place, it's over. You can't cure the arrears through a reorganization or Chapter 13 bankruptcy at that time. Be proactive. Reach out for help as well ahead of time as you can. Ali, I know I've filed a Chapter 13 bankruptcy to stop a foreclosure as little as about 5 or 10 minutes before the foreclosure. But folks, we don't like to do that. It's not.
Please don't make me come into work on a Sunday afternoon. I've done it. I've done it to stop a Monday morning sale. Please don't make me. I meet my children and they're lovely people, but no one wants to do it that unprepared.
And again, people, you may get mixed messages from your mortgage company. They're all trying to make modifications work right now, but it's a different department, or the foreclosure has been turned over to an outside law firm that has no idea you're still talking about a modification. That foreclosure sale date is the important date. Holly, tell us about what legal services does as far as bankruptcy. Do y'all handle all different types of bankruptcy? Are there income restrictions? Tell us about what y'all do for people.
Sure. So we are federally funded, and because of that, our income cap is 200% of the poverty level. That's set by Congress every year. It is completely out of our control. Whatever 200% of the poverty level is our cap. We do have some special grant funding that lets us go a little bit above that in certain areas, but in general, 200% of the poverty line is our cap. That is well below the area median income in most areas of Alabama, certainly in your local municipalities.
But before you go on, I hear that description a lot, but I'm not sure our viewers, what does 200% of the poverty level mean, just in general terms?
So the poverty level is set at the federal level by Congress, and believe it or not, the way that it's actually set has nothing to do with anything except the USDA thrift spending plan for food is literally how they handle that. To give you a rough idea, for 2021, for a household of 4, it's about $53,000 a year in income. For a household of 1, it's a hair over $25,000. It's about $35,000 for a household of 2. So it's very low income, even when you consider it double the poverty level for most people in Alabama is who we serve. Because of that, the vast majority of bankruptcies that I file are Chapter 7s for people who we cannot protect an income or an asset for in any other way. As you know, Alabama protects garnished wages in a really wonky way, and we protect the first $1,000 in a paycheck. That's a really stupid way to write a law. The Alabama legislature is wanting $1,000 in a paycheck For a person who works at a restaurant and is paid weekly, maybe they work at Red Lobster, you can make $52,000 a year and qualify for this protection and keep all of your income. You could be a school bus driver paid monthly and make $13,000 a year and not qualify. So we file where we see a wage garnishment that we can't stop in any other way. Generally, there's a 2-page affidavit that will stop a wage garnishment. But if we can't use that for any reason, or if you've reached the point of what I call, my office is a no-shame zone. There is so much shame and stigma attached to debt, attached to eviction. I joke, but it's true. The only thing I'll shame you for is being a Dallas Cowboys fan. I married an Eagles fan. I can't deal with Dallas Cowboys fans. Everybody else is welcome. But other than that, I won't shame you for anything unless you're a Cowboys fan, and I'll play with you then. But, I call it legal whack-a-mole. I'm sure there's a better term for it, but it's when you just start getting lawsuits coming out of everywhere. Most people, before they come to us, they've tried to pay their bills. Maybe they've tried to consolidate their debts. Maybe they've gone and gotten a payday loan to rob Peter to pay Paul. And the next thing you know, small claims here, small claims there. It's like that whack-a-mole game from Chuck E. Cheese back in the day. Start hitting legal whack-a-mole and you cannot reach financial stability, because as soon as you knock one down, another one pops up. That's when we start looking at a 7 to make sure that someone can keep their housing. Because realistically, if your wages are garnished this week and I stop it, and they're garnished by someone else next week and I stop it, you're losing enough income that you can't pay your rent, and the snowball is about to hit. We pay Chapter 7 to stop the snowball. For most people who go through legal aid, obviously, we are completely free. There is nothing you can pay me. There is not a mechanism by which you can pay me. You can donate to the nonprofit you choose. And for most of our clients, there is a fee waiver on the filing fee for bankruptcy if you fall below 150% of the poverty level. So for the vast majority of people we serve, bankruptcy is completely free, other than the gas you pay to come see me or to come see one of our lawyers around the state. We also, in limited cases, file Chapter 13s for people who are generally, we are doing it to stop a foreclosure. I do tell people that, unfortunately, it is pretty rare to find someone who meets that stringent financial deadline that Congress sets for us and can fund a 13 plan to keep their home. But where they are able to, that is certainly an option that we offer. But by and large, the vast majority of what we file are Chapter 7s. For people whose debt is just unsustainable for daily living, where it's impacting their ability to keep a roof over their head and food in their belly.
Holly, I hope you haven't copyrighted that no shame zone, because I may steal that. I love that term. Folks, good people, I've been doing this for well over 30 years. Good people have money problems.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many folks have this stereotypical view in their mind of a bankrupt being, some bad person or a deadbeat. That is not true. And especially after this last year, it's not true. Good people are behind on their bills, and we want to help you, both Holly at Legal Services and the attorneys with the Bond and Bonus Law Offices. We want to help you. We don't compete against one another. We are both here to help you. We serve different sectors, perhaps. There are people that Holly can't help that we can help. It's important for you to know that there are ways to file a bankruptcy. People that say, well, I'm broke. How am I going to pay for a bankruptcy attorney? Well, as Holly just described, there are ways to have the court filing fee waived or to pay installments. Usually in the states that we do business, if you're doing a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, you don't pay your attorney's fee up front. You pay it as part of your plan of reorganization. And what I tell people, that usually means your creditors are paying your fee, because your monthly payments are going to be based upon your disposable income. You're paying what you can afford to, and if money has to be used to pay your attorney, it often means your creditors aren't being paid. So Holly, I think we both want people to know that there are options available, that they aren't expensive, and there are people that want to help you. Holly, we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to be respectful of your time, and we've had a few questions come in here that I want to pose to you. Some of these will take both of us. I think that there may be some for both of us. But question here, you answered it earlier, but please again. Person wants to know, how long will I have until I get evicted?
So if you're facing eviction and you've been served with a court notice, so the eviction process starts with a non-court notice. Generally, if your landlord is evicting you for non-payment of rent, they've got to give you a 7-day notice to cure or quit. That notice is basically your pay rent or leave or we're going to sue to evict you notice. If you pay your rent within those 7 days, they can't file an eviction. If you don't pay, they can start the eviction process. From that notice, you'll get us, if you aren't able to pay, you'll get a court summons. It'll say the words unlawful detainer on it. That's the fancy lawyer word for eviction in Alabama. You'll have 7 calendar days to answer it. I emphasize the calendar days because people still have this concept that, you know, weekends and holidays don't count. It's 7 calendar days, just count 7. Once you file your answer, the case will get set. And again, it is a checkbox form. It does not cost any money to file it. Check the box that says other, write, I want my day in court. That's all you have to do. You don't have to write your life story. You don't have to attach anything. Check the other box, I want my day in court. Once you have filed your answer, it'll get set for court usually 2 to 3 weeks after you filed your answer. Even if you go to court and lose, you've got 7 days to move after that. You may be able in court, whether you're with an attorney or on your own, to negotiate for time to move with the landlord's attorney. For example, maybe you've signed a lease for another place, but you need 10 days to get into the other place. Most landlord attorneys are more than willing to give you that decent amount of time to move with dignity. No one wants to put all of your stuff out on the curb. They want to work with you. They can't work with you if you don't answer and don't show up. So from
I want to add there, because that's a fear a lot of people have. That they fear, I'm behind on my rent, I'm going to come home and all my stuff's going to be out on the street. The landlord can't just do that on his or her own. They've got to go through this court proceeding where you have the right to raise defenses or work something out.
Yeah. The unlawful detainer process is the exclusive legal method for eviction in the state of Alabama. I won't lie and say that we don't have landlords that do stupid, illegal things. People do stupid, illegal things every day. Drive home on a major highway and you'll see it. If a landlord attempts that illegal eviction, puts your stuff out without following the legal process, you can sue them for actual damages or 3 times the monthly rent. Most landlords are, not many landlords are that stupid anymore. After the first few times they do it and they end up paying 3 times the monthly rent and my attorney's fee. And while I am free to clients, I am very expensive per hour if you have to go pay my attorney's fee back to legal services. That's about how long you have from being past due to a court-ordered eviction, is in the 4 to 6 week range. It is important to note that you don't have to be 30 days behind in your rent. You don't have to be a full month behind to be evicted. Most leases are something like due on the 1st, late after the 5th. If it's the 6th and you haven't paid, they can give you that 7-day cure or quit notice. And if you don't pay, they can file eviction after that. So that's a common misconception, is that you've got to be 30 days behind before they can start the eviction process. That's not true.
Ali, I'm going to go a little bit astray here, but I often hear people say, I'm not paying my rent because they won't fix my plumbing, or they won't, my lights aren't working. Is that a good reason not to pay your rent in the state of Alabama?
It is not. So our law actually exclusively sets out that the one thing you can't do if your landlord isn't making repairs is withhold your rent. To use any of the other remedies under law, you can't have intentionally withheld your rent. There are a lot of options if your landlord isn't making repairs. There are ways to legally break your lease, depending on how serious the repairs are. There are other options from there to argue that, diminished value of the property, or maybe the property isn't meeting a housing code anymore. There are options when your landlord doesn't make repairs, but the one thing you can't do is not pay rent.
Person asks here, if I file bankruptcy, is there a way to keep my home? Yes, people, there is a way to keep your home. Most people that file bankruptcy do not surrender their home. You can, but Alabama has laws that protect a certain amount of equity in your home. It's currently right around $16,000. It's just adjusted, and for a married couple, that doubles. So if you have less than that in equity in your home, you can protect your home. And if you're behind on your payments, you can do a Chapter 13 reorganization type bankruptcy and catch up your payments. You just need to have enough to make your current mortgage payments and a sufficient income to pay into the court to catch up or to fund your plan to catch up what you're behind. But in most cases, we can do something, and I think you probably can say the same at legal services, how we can usually save your home, but get to us early so we can help put together a plan.
The sooner you get to me, the better. And, you know, one thing I caution people about is bankruptcy law is unique because it's federal law, but these exemptions that you're talking about, the money and stuff that you can protect, is set by state law. And so we get people who play Google Esquire, and you Google the bankruptcy law. And look, I'm all about being informed and knowing your rights. But because bankruptcy is this unique amalgamation of federal and state, you get people who go, oh, I thought the homestead exemption was unlimited. No, that's Florida, and that's why celebrities file there. You know, I tell people I can look up a great YouTube video on how to perform a root canal, and absolutely no one wants me to do that. It doesn't qualify me to perform a root canal. The same thing is true with bankruptcy. Look up information from trusted sources. Go on Legal Services website. Go on Bond and Bodis's website. Go on the court's website. But when you start getting into chat rooms and forums and Reddit, you're getting information from other states that can really do you a disservice, and no one wants that for you. We want you to be well informed of your rights.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified there. And don't just go to websites. Let me add, give us a call. Call us. We'll talk to you about what your options are. And I'm sure, again, that's the same for legal services as it is at the Bond and Bodis law offices. Absolutely free initial consultations right now where we'll answer some of these questions. But the exemption laws do change from state to state. Holly, I have offices in, of course, Alabama and Mississippi. Until, as you remember, I guess it's been 8-9 years ago from now, our homestead exemption in Alabama was only $5,000. At the same time, a consumer that came to see me in Mississippi could protect up to $75,000 worth in their home, and a homeowner in Florida had that unlimited homestead exemption. So it varies quite a bit from state to state. Bankruptcy is not a time when you want to do it on your own, folks. You know, I went to law school. Holly went to law school. We've been doing this for a long time. Let us help you with something like this. You know, you're risking losing your home. You're risking losing your car. You're risking the wage garnishment. It's not a time to try to do it on your own. You can, but I encourage you to reach out for help. We offer absolutely free initial consultations, and if you qualify, legal services can help you without paying any legal fees. Holly, I am going to be respectful of your time. We're right up against an hour. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you participating. I always leave a minute or two at the end to give my guest, and I want to give you, if there's anything important you think our viewers need to know about evictions or foreclosures or the services offered by legal services, please go ahead and chime in now. Don't let me miss your opportunity to talk.
Sure. So one thing we didn't talk about that is shockingly common in Alabama are rent-to-own agreements. People who know me know that they are my least favorite thing in the world. We know what a lease does and what a landlord and a tenant have to do under it. We know what a mortgage does and what a buyer, a seller, a finance company have to do. Rent-to-owns fall in the middle, and they're incredibly contract specific. And a lot of times that contract might as well be written on a cocktail napkin. If you have a rent-to-own, please contact a lawyer. Everything depends on your contract. Don't assume that one of these forms of protection covers you. Seriously, call us. I'm here 6 days a week. I don't want anyone to lose their home through one of those vessels. And that's been something that we've really had to deal with a lot over the past year, our rent-to-owns, because they fall in a crevasse in between the areas of protection. And, you know, the other thing is if you think you qualify for legal services, or even if you don't, we are happy to take an application. We're happy to tell you if we can help. If we can't, we can point you to who can. We do pretty much everything civil you can think of. And especially as it comes to housing and consumer law, you know, like I said, we're a no shame zone. We are not, you know, I know that there is this perception that legal aid lawyers, how good is a free lawyer? Well, we're the best lawyers that money can't buy. Most of the people in my office have been doing this for over a decade. This is our passion. And I assure you, we are still pretty feared when we walk in a courtroom. we're here to help. And I just don't want shame to stop people from getting the help that they need and facing a massive loss for their family that, quite frankly, changes the trajectory of their future because they were too ashamed to call or come in. Don't do that to yourself. Call us, call, the attorney that you trust, call an attorney that you choose, but don't put your family at risk over something that we might very well have been able to fix in an hour for free.
Yeah, great advice. And again, you and all of the attorneys at Legal Services are heroes. We appreciate the work you do on behalf of the least of us far too often. I do want folks to know that the Bond and Bonus Law Offices also are offering absolutely free initial consultations. These are tough times. We want to help you. Please reach out for help. Holly, thanks again. Thanks also to RGB behind you, one of my heroes. I see her on the desk behind
my little
you.
shrine.
To all of our viewers, remember that these recordings are available on our website, and the Bond and Bonus Facebook Live takes place every Wednesday at 1 Central Time. We look forward to seeing you back here next week. On behalf of Holly, on behalf of myself, God bless all of you, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.